Hi everyone, Rukshan here, and I've just returned after covering two protests in the city of Melbourne today near Parliament House. One was a anti-immigration protest by the far right, the extreme far right, and the other was a counter protest by the far left to counter these anti-immigration protesters by being pro-immigration and anti-racism. Now, the distinction I've made here between the far right and the far left, and I know some people don't like to get into these kind of these word games about political ideologies, but it's the best way to explain what's happening in the streets of Melbourne right now, because I'm seeing more and more these two groups with extreme views on either side coming together on the street to not discuss, sorry, definitely not discuss, to have a go at each other, all right, to be at each other's throats about these topics of discussion that's also being discussed in the community. Okay, so what I mean by that is recently we saw, the women's rights rally when people were talking about certain issues to do with gender rights for women. We had these same two groups turn up to hijack this protest. Okay, one side comes from the view of taking advantage of this, which is this far right group, to have their own message espoused to in front of the media and anyone else that would want to listen to whatever they're saying. And the other side, the far left, people who are countering these types of discussions and protests and ideas that people have, they're coming from the side of defending, certain ideological standpoints, certain political views. Now, whether you think either side is right or wrong, or there's justifications, or there's gray areas, all this kind of stuff, there is this, basic thing that we have to accept, that the far right, the extreme far right groups that are turning up with the way that they're carrying on with these like Nazi symbolism, the salutes, just the manner in the way that they're speaking is very troubling. And I think a lot of Victorians, the media, government, a lot of people have condemned this type of behavior, of it being unbecoming of what we are as a civil society. But the fact that this group exists and they continue to carry on like this goes to show you just even this small fringe group, okay, of about 30 or so people are being very effective right now in terms of hijacking political discussions we're having in our community. And the police, the media, even the far left, people who are opposed to these groups, are feeding into that by giving them legitimacy over and over and over again. Okay, that's just my take on it. And typically for a pro-immigration or anti-racism protest, I think a lot of people in the community would get behind this, because it kind of makes sense that we are in Australia a country that is anti-racism, and we are a country that is very multicultural and that has had migration from all around the world for a long time, and that is kind of a part of the makeup of who we are. Sure, there are discussions right now within our community around issues to do with immigration and the type of immigration that we want to have into our country. Because, under the current Labor government, they're saying, 500,000 plus people are going to be brought into Australia. And the issue, I think, in the mainstream discussions around this is not really to do with race or immigration per se. It's to do with the fact that, do we have the capacity and the resources to house these people? Is our power infrastructure enough to, if we do end up housing all these people and building more houses, do we have the capacity to actually power these homes, right? So these are the kind of policy discussions which are happening around this issue. But on the streets of Melbourne, that's not what's happening. We are seeing radical sides on both sides of this issue having a go at each other. And I think it's more so about ideological grandstanding from both sides, because one side that claims to be anti-racism, pro-immigration, they are also caught up in their own ideological worldviews about the people around them. Okay, I experienced this myself going there just to kind of capture what's happening, something I've been doing for a long time. And from all these protests that I attend, I'm seeing these different behaviors of these groups. Now, that far right extreme group, the neo-Nazis, however you want to term them, they actually play to the police. A lot of the time we see the police guard that they get, the police escort. Even this time around, they had a police escort, the protection of the police. Now, it's very confronting for people sometimes when they see, people who are espousing these extreme beliefs being protected by the police. But of course, police are caught in between a rock and a hard place in terms of, allowing people to be able to, express themselves, have political views, sometimes extreme, sometimes really extreme. Then how do you protect that if they don't have the power to arrest, or certain speech is protected? All these kind of issues come into it. Okay, I don't really want to go into that too much, but that's kind of what the police are dealing with when it comes to these groups. Then on the other side, you have these far left, Antifa, okay, these Victorian socialists, these groups who say that they represent mainstream Australia as well. Okay, they represent refugees, they represent immigrants, they represent all these things. Well, maybe they believe that they do, and maybe the general idea of what they're fighting for is something that many people would in the community would support. But the way that they go about it is as extreme as the people that they're denouncing. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. The way that they approach this stuff is as extreme and potentially as dangerous for society as the very thing that they're fighting. Like I said, I get to see it firsthand because I get to go there, film these things, and try to really see what's being said, and in what manner these views are being expressed, and the hostility that is there for people that they believe do not agree with them or do not align with them for whatever reason. Okay, that's myself, and I saw other journalists attacked and other people being yelled at and so on. The hostility that they have towards people that don't agree with them 100% on the manner in which they carry things on is very dangerous. And in fact, like I'm going to say it again, it's as dangerous as the extreme views on the far right. And the reason that they're as dangerous is because they are going unchecked. A lot of people are noticing this type of dangerous rhetoric where they just go around calling everyone Nazis, or where they go around trying to say that anyone that actually discusses immigration must be a Nazi, or anyone that has any views about immigration policies in our country, whether they want to cap immigration or whether they want to, have a different process put in place, they're also Nazis by just the way that they frame the issue. Okay, you're racist if you want to have a decent immigration policy for Australia. You are potentially allied with these Nazis if you share those kind of sane political views that people all around the world have. It's not just Australia that deals with issues to do with immigration. All countries have issues to do with their borders and who comes to their country and so on. Okay, it's not unique to Australia, and a lot of the times it's got nothing to do with racism. It's got more to do with resources. It's got more to do with the economics of those issues, and I think those lines are being blurred now by these extreme groups on the left and the right. And I was there filming. These people were calling me a Nazi. They were telling me to go to the other side with the Nazis, where, as much as they might believe in their feeble minds that for some reason that a Sri Lankan Australian would be welcome and embraced by these groups, they're kidding themselves. They're actually ideologically so engrossed in their own nonsense that they think this stuff is true. They think that people like us, right, people that look like me, agree with those ideas because we have, different political views, right? We're open to having political discussions about things like immigration or things like race, and, be more open about certain views, right? Question certain narratives, not play the victim, okay? These kind of things make them believe that people like myself are Nazis, or one of the terms I heard used a few times to describe me today was a race traitor. So their whole perception around people like me is that if I don't agree with them, okay, and I'm talking to all migrants, especially of migrants of color in Australia, the far left, okay, the far right extreme neo-Nazis might say you're not welcome in this country, but the far left, they'll welcome you into this country. They'll tell you, hey, come, we welcome all refugees, all this kind of stuff. And it sounds great. But what they won't tell you, okay, until they have to tell you, which is what they're telling me, is that if you do not agree with them 100% on their ideological standpoints, that you are a race traitor. Okay, that's their whole game. Okay, you have to agree with, you are subject to them. Okay, they did you a favor. Okay, and I'm only speaking like this is because majority of the people that are at these protests for the far left or the far right are white. Okay, they're white young kids on one side and white older men, usually in their late 20s, late 30s on the other side. Like, these are the demographics of this group. Now, I've been covering protests for a long time, as many of you would know, and especially these kind of anti-mandate, lockdown protests, all this kind of stuff. At the height of those protests, it was a very diverse crowd of lots of different types of people. But what we're getting are these extreme groups that are on the street fighting each other, okay, wasting police time and resources with their endless moaning and vitriol towards each other, are just white people speaking for other people that they believe they have a right to speak for. Okay. Now, I'm not going to discount the fact that they can speak up for immigrants or they can speak up for refugees. I kind of get all of those things, but their belief is that if you don't agree with them, okay, you are also a Nazi. And that's not going to work. That's not going to fly. And these scenes where I'm being surrounded by these people, being harassed, pushed around, just garbage, right? It's just garbage stuff. They're telling the police to get rid of me because I'm a Nazi or a race traitor. All this type of stuff. They hit Avi Yemeni from Rebel News with a pole. Okay, this is Antifa, the far left, hit him with a pole. Okay, they attacked his cameraman. They were throwing things towards the police. They were throwing things towards the far right, neo-Nazis. Now, some people might be like, "Oh, well, you have to attack the neo-Nazis and all this kind of stuff." But a lot of the violence that we saw happening was when the police are trying to escort these far right groups out of that area. And they were followed by these far left groups with projectiles being thrown, them trying to kind of break police lines and get in there. Now, people will interpret this in many different ways based on how they view this as a success or a win, because they're fighting the bad guys. But in the real world, okay, where it matters, the truth matters. And the truth is that the violence that we're seeing on the streets right now, even though these extremists are there doing their salutes and doing all sorts of stuff that might be making people uncomfortable, the violence really is coming from the far left, and we can't escape that. As of right now, it's coming from the far left, and I'm seeing that firsthand. And I think if you're watching full coverage of these events, especially via live streams, you would be seeing that firsthand as well. And whether you want to get into ideological debate or not is something totally different to the reality of what's happening. And I often wonder when I'm there, how is this going to be portrayed in the media that night? Because there's news reporters there. There's a 7 News reporter who was caught up in the middle of it. I think he had some pepper spray or sea spray or whatever on him as well. And their cameras really, regardless of all of that, and even the framing of certain articles, are all framed around this debate around, oh, well, the neo-Nazis were there and they ended up in scuffles. I mean, partly true. Yes, the neo-Nazis were there, but the scuffles didn't necessarily all happen because of them. And, the cameras are normally always pointed towards the direction of this fringe group of far-right people because of the things that they stand for in terms of their views. They're very extreme. They're easily exploited when we're talking about fear, where they're easily manipulated to, associate people with all sorts of different things. We saw that with what they did to the women's rights rally, right? These men, all they had to do was turn up. All they had to do was turn up, and all of a sudden, everyone there that was there for something else is also associated with them. So it's a very powerful image to use those men. And I think they kind of know the power that they have right now in Victoria, because, they shut down that Now, some people, whether they agree or with this or not, doesn't matter. But it was the fact that they were probably going to turn up that shut down that Monash City Council drag story event, right? Now, whether let's forget about the issue of drag story time, but the fact that this small group of fringe group have this type of power in Victoria, who do you blame for giving them that power? I, I I honestly believe it's the government. I believe it's the police. I believe it's these far left people who are giving them so much attention, so much power, so much association with things that they are not even associated with, is just empowering them to do this more and more and more. And how do we end up keeping a check and balance on this? Well, as of right now, I don't see a way forward where this gets resolved and this kind of, goes away. I think this is actually the start of a very serious problem. And one of the only solutions that I can see to this problem is the condemnation of both these groups, the extreme far left and the extreme far right, and condemnation and realization that they are trying to hijack our societies into their extreme beliefs, whether that's extreme left or extreme right. These people are trying to hijack us into these groups, right? And we need to see beyond that. And mainstream Australians, the everyday Australian, needs to be able to discern the what's happening as it pertains to all of this, because I think it's going to start impacting us more and more. And right now, there is a side of politics who are enjoying, right? They're enjoying the fact that they can associate this group with everyone else and say that these people represent you. That's why they say to me, Rukshan, you're a Nazi, and Rukshan, you're a race traitor, and all this type of thing, because they can make that association. And I'm more than happy to stand with people who are anti-racism, for instance. I'm against racism. I think racism is abhorrent. But there are people who don't realize that they're actually being racist by the manner in which they are dealing with people that just have a different point of view on a topic. Okay, they just have a different political view. It's not necessarily racism, and these people need to tone it down and get with the program in terms of bringing people together and really fighting to keep Victoria and Melbourne from going down a path that it might not recover for a long time. We are entering this this time period in our state where we're almost becoming like, Portland in America. Now, if you don't know Portland, that's like the home of Antifa in terms of they just run amok there. And then you do have these far right groups. You have these far left groups just going at each other all the time over every single issue. And no sane person can have a protest. No sane person can get a point across. All that's gone now. It's all that's muddled now. And trying to take advantage of this is the wrong thing to do. I think calling it out is correct. And there's a lot of space for debate on this issue. There's a lot of space to, discuss how we can tackle this type of extremism. Again, this is just my views based on my observations. People are definitely going to have different opinions to all of this. I'm merely just stating the fact that it's not always as black and white as it's presented in the media. There are extreme elements on both sides of this debate, and reasonable people can still hold reasonable views about immigration or racism or all these type of things. We can have reasonable debates about, where the lines are and all this type of stuff without getting into this vile, nasty stuff that we're seeing on our streets more and more. Thanks, everyone. If you're enjoying my content, you can subscribe to me on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Instagram, and of course, Twitter. Elon, what's going on? Who's this new CEO? I had high hopes for Twitter, but now it's run by a WEF puppet, apparently. I don't know. Anyway, guys, at The Real Rukshan. See you next time.